September 17th, 2011.
A small group of people moved into Liberty Square in the Wall Street area of New York City. Their intentions were to protest and shed light on the injustices of our financial system and class inequality in the United States.
Every day, the group grew in size, and word began to spread about the movement that is now known as Occupy Wall Street.
The word didn't spread through mainstream media, and immediately the question arose whether or not the lack of coverage was because it wasn't newsworthy, or because some of the people being protested against have the control over the various mainstream media outlets. On September 30th, we took a trip into the city to see what wasn't being talked about. Before we go on, let's go over some facts. 46.2 million Americans live below the poverty line. Unemployment is at 9.1%. At the end of 2010, consumer credit card debt reached $820 billion and was then surpassed by student loan debt at $850. 1% of the population controls 35% of the total wealth in our country. 5% of the population controls 60% of the total wealth. 20% of the population controls 85% of our total wealth. Since 2008, $4.6165 trillion have been given to Citibank as part of the Emergency Economic Stabilization Act of 2008,
more commonly known as the bailout.
People have a hard time grasping how much money that actually is, so let's put it into perspective. On the left is the total spent on just Citibank's bailout alone. Now let's compare it to some of the other things the United States have spent their money on over the years. The Marshall Plan, the American contribution to rebuild Europe after World War II, cost $12.7 billion in 1948. Today, after inflation, that number is $115.3 billion. The Louisiana Purchase, the purchase of 828,800 square miles of land that now makes up most of Middle America, cost $217 billion after inflation. The race to the moon against the Soviet Union cost $237 billion after inflation. The S&L crisis, the bailout of the saving and loan associations in the 1980s to the 1990s, cost $256 billion after inflation. The Korean War cost $454 billion after inflation. The New Deal, the economic plan to get the United States out of the Great Depression, cost an estimated $500 billion after inflation. The invasion of Iraq cost $597 billion after inflation. The Vietnam War cost $698 billion after inflation. The entire historical budget of NASA cost $851.2 billion after inflation. After spending $3.92 trillion, it still does not amount to the money that Citibank was given during the bailouts alone. The major issue is that the six largest financial institutions in our country control 60% of the United States' assets. More simply, the six largest banks have a majority vote when it comes to the actual wealth of our country. As history has shown, these inequalities have led to social change. The French Revolution in the late 1700s was a result of the masses revolting against the aristocracy and the French crown. The Indian independence movement, led by Gandhi in the 1920s, used non-violence to expel British rule from India. And most recently in Egypt, where citizens banded together online as well as in the streets to overthrow the dictatorship of their country. Knowing what we know now, take a look at what we saw. On the day we got there, the group decided to march on One Police Plaza in response to the police brutality that had occurred the days before. So at 5:30, we marched. Seeing everybody march made me evaluate what it means to be part of the 99%. Issues like this seem to eliminate the small differences that we use to separate ourselves from each other, be it religion or race or political preference. They all seem to disappear with the realization that we are all the 99%. And we're all in this together. With all the action, we weren't able to get this woman's name, but we later learned that she was a professor at a New York State college.